Hello, everyone. It's Diggory and Oscar here. Oscar, say hello.
Hi, everybody.
We just thought we'd jump in and give a little coronavirus update, just on what that means for the pod going forward. So, from my end, I can still make the podcast. Oscar, from your end?
I can still make the podcast. I have a microphone. Audio quality might be a little bit different because I'm not in a studio anymore, but all good.
Yeah, all good. So hopefully, if anything, nothing will change in the podcast too much. We'll still keep up with the schedule and things will still keep coming your way unless there's any drastic changes. For the moment, we won't have Synopsis Simon as you know and love him. We'll have Synopsis Simon Haynes, who is an actor who we've been listed instead. But that will be just a short change. Hopefully things will go back to normal once this is all blown over. In terms of talking about coronavirus on the podcast, we're going to stay away from doing that. Firstly, because the nature of how we record these things is sometimes we record things a couple of weeks before. So if we talk about any specific news about coronavirus, it might be outdated quite quickly. As we know, it's changing by the day. Secondly, we're not experts. We don't know what's going on that much. We're just two guys who love Hugh Grant. If we got something wrong, we wouldn't want to spread the wrong information. And thirdly, I don't know about you, but all the entertainment that I like, the current entertainment, is currently dominated by coronavirus. And I find it quite claustrophobic. So we want this podcast to be an escape for you. Somewhere where you can come and just think, Hugh Grant, brilliant. Somewhere
you can come and just think about Hugh's pretty face, and that's it.
Exactly, and that's it. And we just want to be that escape for you guys. So hopefully that's not a problem, and this is all over very, very soon.
Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two friends watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question, is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? This week, as every week, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Oscar. How are you doing today, Oscar?
Doing very, very well. It's a nice sunny day and I'm very, very excited to record another episode.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. I'm in the same good moods. I watched the film today. The film we're talking about today is Bitter Moon. I watched that today, and as we'll go into, it's quite a sexy film. A lot of sex in there. As I like to do sometimes, we'll look at the plot keywords on IMDb for this. The plot keywords, Oscar, are infidelity, extramarital affair, unfaithfulness, latex dress, and legs spreading. Now,
wow.
How the hell is a plot keyword leg spreading? How is that a plot keyword that's made its way onto the top 5 for this film? Leg spreading.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah, that must be a first for a film, you would think.
We'll go into this a little bit later, I'm sure. But let me tell you, watching this film at 10 in the morning was abrasive.
Wow.
Should we get straight into it?
Let's get straight into it.
Fantastic. Take it away, Synopsis Simon Haynes.
Bitter Moon. Directed by Roman Polanski and released in 1992. British couple Fiona, played by Dame Kristin Scott Thomas, and Nigel, played by Hugh Grant, are sailing to Istanbul. On their cruise, Nigel and Fiona encounter Mimi, played by Emmanuelle Seigner, a beautiful and mysterious Frenchwoman, and her wheelchair-bound American husband, Oscar, played by Peter Coyote. Oscar invites Nigel to his cabin where, over the course of several days, Oscar regales the story of how he met Mimi, their salacious, steamy love affair, and its torrid, bitter breakdown.
So, Oscar, as always, Bitter Moon, very exciting to talk about this. I can't wait to talk about this one. How did you watch this film? What circumstances did you watch it in?
I don't know where to start with this one. Hugh just... I have to say, Hugh's look is one of sort of child schoolboyishness, and it's contrasted with the kind of sexy outrageousness of Oscar's character and Mimi's character.
You're absolutely right. What's funny as well is my sister the other day said to us, she was like, why do you start every review talking about how Hugh Grant looks and his appearance? And I was like, and obviously I put my film hat on. I was like, look, Jess, when you're talking about film, as Oscar and I are, in a serious manner, you have to realise that film is a very visual art as much as an oral or otherwise. You know, every frame is sought over and pored over, and you have to think the look of things is very, very, very important. It's the mise en scène, as the French would say. This film is set in Paris. It's very, very important. So with my hat on, obviously my film hat on, I was telling her, look, the appearances are very important. And number two, Hugh Grant's a fit motherfucker, and I just want to talk about how fit he is all the time. So, with that in mind, this film, unfortunately, if you're coming to this film for Hugh Grant's looks, I think his hair is really not on fleek. Is what I've written in my notes.
This one's a bit brutal for Hugh's look. I have to say, from all the films we've reviewed so far, this is kind of like the one that Hugh might want to put away in his closet. If he's bringing out his sort of top 5, this is definitely not making it. And his clothes are dreadful too. I don't know what he made of his clothes, but he's got, he wears tweed jackets and sort of double-breasted blazers. Yeah. And he you know what? He kind of looks like my dad in the school cricket team. It's got that.
Yes,
it's one of those really terrible prep school haircuts. Yeah. Which the most sort of unsexy look there is going.
Exactly, and that one of the problems with it is the fact that it's not the Hugh Grant curtains that we've come to know and love. Oscar can see this actually. I tried to get the Hugh Grant curtains today.
Mate, they're looking very good.
Really, because I was thinking, because now we're in self-isolation again, coronavirus, everyone. I was like, well, now I'm going to try out the Hugh Grant hair. And I'm going to style it. I'm going to do it a little bit different tomorrow. Maybe I'll post it on Insta story and see how it goes.
The Hugh Grant hair challenge. That could be a fantastic new challenge.
I'm thinking, if this goes on for long enough, my hair is going to grow out a little bit longer. So maybe I'll look like Daniel Cleaver. That sort of length would be amazing. Anyway. Less about my hair, more about Hugh's hair in this film. But the problem is he's not going with the curtains, which we know and love. He's gone with the sort of side sweep over.
The brushed over look.
Exactly, and it just does not work. He looks like, I mean, the word that comes to head is prune. I'm not sure why, but
he does.
He doesn't
but
look great.
He the whole way through this film, he's made out to be the kind of vanilla couple who only do missionary. And contrast with Oscar and Mimi, who just, like, as we'll get into, try absolutely everything there is going in the bedroom.
Exactly. And so in that way, his very, like you say, dad in the cricket team kind of look and his, kind of shit hair, it completely works. What did you think about him as a character as well? You talked about, how he's meant to be presented as, like, vanilla chap. But what else any other thoughts on... And also how he played the role.
I have to say, Diggory, I feel like I feel bad because I'm always the man criticising Hugh, but I don't think this film shows him off particularly well. Like, if you compare him to his other wacky film that we've watched so far, in The Lair of the White Worm, I actually think he played that role quite well. Yeah. Here, I think it's almost like he's cutting his acting teeth. I think this is like his 10th film or something, and he's still probably... I mean, this is before, to put into context, this is a couple years before Four Weddings and a Funeral, so he still hasn't got his big break. And I still think, he's finding his feet very much in this film. And I don't love it.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the character is meant to be this very straight, posh, British. Again, right so far you're thinking tick, 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 right? These are all strings to Hugh Grant's bow. But the difference is he's a bumbling posh guy in this film, but without the charm.
What's your name?
Nigel Dobson. Hi.
Okay, Nigel. Amuse me. Say something funny.
Blimey. Well, you're French, aren't you? I can tell from your accent. I mean, your English is very, very good, but for some reason I can always tell with frogs. Sorry. Stupid thing to say, it just slipped out. Schoolboy expression comes from working in the city. I'm a Eurobond dealer, and we're always calling people frogs. You're right, boring. But anyway, you call us roast beef, don't you? The roast beef. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway.
Too funny for me, Nigel. I'm choking with laughter. So long. I leave you to your magnetic, irresistible personality.
You know, he uses his bumbling poshness, but there's no underlying charm there at all. It's just completely soft.
And he's very wooden.
Exactly. So there's no charm to it. And that's where I think the issues come, because, I mean, it's a serviceable performance. And actually, do you know what? I think it's good. I think he does exactly what the role is meant for. Like you say, he's meant to be straight and down the line. But the problem is, without that level of charm, where I feel like he feels most comfortable, we're sort of seeing a normal Hugh, but without any of the extra push and panache.
I think if we view it as a sort of learning curve in his acting career, you got to get through this teething process to get your Daniel Cleavers and your Charleses of this world.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think you're right, Oscar.
So, I mean, this film is based on two main couples. You have Oscar and Mimi, who are the sexy, crazy couple. Oscar is in a wheelchair and Mimi is his wife, who's very subservient and does all this crazy sexual stuff. And then you have Fiona and Nigel, who are the posh British couple. Nigel being Hugh Grant, which is just a classic name for this character. Nigel, I feel like Nigel's
exactly.
The most vanilla, sort of boring, generic people in the entire world. Sorry if you're called Nigel out there. But what's interesting is actually that Fiona, who is played by Kristen Scott Thomas, we see obviously Hugh and Kristen Scott Thomas again a couple of years later in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, but this time Kristen Scott Thomas is in love with Hugh and Hugh doesn't reciprocate that love. Whereas in this film, they're a couple. So it's quite nice to see that if you're a big 4 Weddings and a Funeral fan, to see that romance that we didn't get to see in 4 Weddings blossom here.
Although, well, I had two things I'd say about that. Is one, she's also called Fiona in that film.
Exactly.
She's called Fiona in both films. It was mad. And also, you see them together, but maybe you'll see a glimpse of how it wouldn't have worked, because obviously their relationship is, they're going to this trip to India via Istanbul on the cruise to sort of save their marriage. That's why it's called Bitter Moon. I think it's meant to be honeymoon, but then obviously it's sort of bitter. Because
there's a French pun involved, I think, with that.
You're right. In the Hugh Grant universe, the Hugh-niverse, I'm sure that there's some link there where this film is sort of in the future after 4 Weddings, where maybe it splinters off into its own parallel universe where they do get together, but unfortunately, they knew it wasn't going to work, and he should have been with Andy McDowell the whole time.
Indeed.
God, that Oscar, this is huge. Now I'm thinking we should make a map of the Hugh-niverse. Like, like the Marvel universe and shit like that. We should make the Hugh-niverse, because there's actually loads of these little things going on. Because obviously we saw the guy in Bridget Jones, who's also in Lair of the White Worm.
Yeah, we should make all these connections.
We should make these connections. That's something to think about for the future.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted. Oh, the podcast show.
Right, Oscar, let's get into the meat of this film. The film pretty much follows quite a simple structure. Once Hugh Grant meets Oscar, and Oscar tells him all of his relationship with his wife, Mimi, and how they met and how they had all this crazy sex. The film pretty much takes place on the cruise and then flashbacks to Paris, where Oscar met his partner. And this relationship with Mimi is very, very, very sexy. I mean, this film is half cruise ship, half just sex scene. There are more sex scenes in this film than I've had sex in my entire life, and that means there's over 0 sex scenes in this film.
I mean, the hugely disappointing thing, though, Diggory, is that when you told me that there was a lot of sex in this film before I watched it, I assumed you meant that Hugh was going to be getting his kit off. And
No.
I'm sorry to disappoint fans out there, but we don't see Hugh with his kit off, and we see a lot of the other two characters, Mimi and Oscar, with their kit off. But none of the less, it's still entertaining, to say the least.
It's very, very, very saucy.
Some of those sex scenes that slightly push the barriers a little bit. So, for example, I don't know, Diggory, maybe you wanted to talk briefly about your favourite two.
I want to make a point here that the film doesn't just show you the sex scenes, so it has both kinds of imagery. In the writing, it's very, very emotive and descriptive writing. So when Oscar's telling these stories, sometimes it won't show you on screen what he's talking about. So there's that bit when he talks about how Mimi we're watching TV and Mimi, so you don't see this on screen, but Mimi, he's saying like Mimi got up, went over to the TV and just lifted up her skirt and just started pissing on it. And then Oscar crawls across the room, gets under her legs, and he explains how he feels this hot, love dripping down him, and how he has the most explosive orgasm he's ever had. And you're sat there, and as I say, it was literally 10 o'clock in the morning.
Hugh has the exact same reaction as most of us would have, because we flash back to Hugh after he's heard this story, and he is like at his full bumblingness, and he's just like, God, you are absolutely absurd. I mean, I can't believe. But then the weird thing is that the caveat that Oscar really gets into is that Hugh is slightly turned on by all this, we think.
Exactly.
And Hugh wants a bit of Mimi. I mean, the whole film basically revolves around Oscar wanting to allow Hugh to sleep with Mimi because he's now in a wheelchair and he can't give the pleasure to Mimi that she deserves, and he wants Hugh to sleep with him.
Yeah.
With her, sorry. And so Hugh is like tickled by these outrageous sex scenes. There's a couple of others that are slightly outrageous. She basically spills yogurt or milk down her front and then starts massaging herself. And then there's another one where Oscar dresses up as a pig and starts making farm noises in the act of intercourse. So that was a little bit weird.
Where is he? Come, piggy wiggy. Where are you? How dare you try to fuck me, you filthy beast!
Well, I was thinking, I've never seen a film that wasn't obviously a porn film where an actor, because in this, so she drinks this milk and like spills the milk all down her front, and then she goes up to Oscar, and he starts licking the milk off her, and I've never seen an actor lick another actor's nipple in a sexy way on screen before that wasn't obviously like some weird porn film. Like that, I was like, this is a graphic film. So as I say, it's got both. It's got the imagery just in the words, but also the imagery is in like literal images that are like pretty graphic stuff.
Look out the window. Look out the window. Look out the window. It's Hugh Grant in a Pret.
There are a couple of other scenes, Diggory, that we should move on to. The first of which is maybe the scene where Hugh kisses Mimi and finally falls for her, and it's excruciating because you're just like, Hugh, you're so stupid. Like, you've fallen for it. You've fallen for the act, and personally, I think that Kristen Scott Thomas is a serious catch. I think she's very beautiful. So I'm just like, Hugh, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, you've let yourself down here. Like, you're probably the most boring husband as you're portraying in this thing, and now you're just like falling for one act of like lust that you're getting from Mimi.
Well, that's the thing as well, and there's two reasons why that's bad. One, it's like he doesn't even really know Mimi yet. Of course, he's seen her and she's really fit and all that sort of stuff, but all he's done is seen her and had like very brief convo with her, and then heard from her kind of fucking weird husband, like, over and over again about all the stories about how much sex they've had. So really, he doesn't know too much about her. So you're a bit annoyed when he falls for it, but it maybe shows just how devoid of intimacy his relationship with Kristen Scott Thomas is. And that's why he's led to it. But also, the other warning sign is, the last time, actually, I think just before they kissed, Mimi says to him, "Meet me in my room." And he's like, "Oh, okay."
Mimi? May I come in?
Close the door.
So he closes the door, goes up, sits on the bed, and she's in there, grabs her hand and kisses it.
April Fool!
We got ya! And then they're both, and then she runs out the toilet laughing, and then it's like, and then he's like, "It's just a joke," and obviously Hugh Grant's
Yeah,
like,
he plays the kind of shocked schoolboy again.
So
where it's like he's got in trouble and he
Exactly.
realised that he's being a little bit naughty, and then he's been caught red-handed.
Exactly.
And he's so embarrassed, and he's like, "You're absurd."
Yeah. Which I think this film is great. I mean, it's worth maybe doing a supercut of all the ways in which Hugh Grant goes, "Oh," there's a few moments where she's like, "Oh, bloody hell, steady on, old boy." I think when Oscar's revealing too much, he's like, "Oh, that really is quite enough." It's like,
I think I'm probably as broad-minded as the next man, but... I mean, honestly, there are limits.
I'm sorry, I thought that was the sort of thing I was supposed to talk about.
What do you think you're doing? Sharing the details of your perverted sex life with a total stranger. It's just downright obscene.
You're supposed to be my gynecologist. I'm supposed to tell you this sort of thing.
Do you think I want to hear it? I still don't know what gives you the idea that I enjoy being used as a rubbish dump for your unsavoury reminiscences.
Rubbish dump? You're my gynecologist.
Why do you keep saying that?
Because I've made an appointment. Look, here, Dr. Hugh Grant, gynecology, 12:30.
Right.
So it's funny, is it?
I know, I mean... You know, in some way it helps you get it off your chest or something.
Get it off my chest. I mean, you're supposed to look at my vagina in a minute.
You know, steady on, old boy.
But the film culminates in a strange way at the end, which really does leave you with a kind of strange taste in your mouth, because I don't really know like what the hell to think about the ending of the film. To sum up, basically, it's New Year's Eve, and Hugh and the rest of the crews are having a big party to celebrate it. And he comes down, sees Mimi in the dance floor, and they start dancing together.
and Hugh Grant's dancing is fucking dreadful. It's so bad.
Oh, yeah. Now you know why he was reluctant to do the Love Actually dance.
Yeah, man.
Because it's like dad dancing
Yeah.
at its worst. It's like a little shuffle of the arms. I mean, to be honest, I'm going to admit I can't do much better, but it really is the most wooden, horrific dancing you've ever seen, and contrasted with Mimi, who is just like, you know, flaunting it all,
Giving it. And that's the problem as well, because like he's meant to be going up and dancing with Mimi and trying to get with her, but obviously he's too self-conscious, too self-aware, keeps sort of like half dancing with her and then half not, and she just gets bored of it, and you can tell. But that's the problem. This is when I'm like, okay, Hugh, that's a great bit of acting from you, because that is exactly how your character would do it. He'd sort of be like half, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like, and also even with his foot in, he's such a bad dancer anyway that it just doesn't, like, because he's so straight and wooden, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, well, perhaps I'm not giving him enough credit, because yeah, I think you're right. Maybe I don't like the character, but the acting is actually not bad.
I think I've fallen in love with you.
Come on. I'm just a fantasy. An amusement on a boring voyage.
You're hurting me terribly.
The way you're hurting your wife.
She doesn't know about us.
She's looking right at us.
Hugh thinks that Kristen Scott Thomas Fiona is still out because she has taken some pills that are meant to sort of knock her out. But she's sitting there with a glass of gin and tonic in her hand, and he's like, "Oh fuck, okay, shit." And then, Diggs, what happens next is absolutely mental.
Kristen Scott Thomas gets up, goes and starts dancing with Mimi, and they start necking on, tashing off. They start absolutely, you know, and yeah, they're dancing. The dancing's fucking saucy, and yeah, and then they start getting with each other. And I think so. This whole film has been building up to Hugh getting with Mimi, and it's sort of been Oscar, the character, being like, "Come on, get with Mimi, get with Mimi," and because that's what Hugh's been looking for. He's been looking for this woman who because of his own relationship being, sexless, he's now looking for someone who's got the sex factor. And now he's watching as the woman who is in the sexless marriage with him, getting with her instead. And the whole point, I think what was so beautiful about it for me is that it just shows that Kristen Scott Thomas had it all along. Kristen Scott Thomas can be the woman that Hugh wants her to be, and Hugh can be the man that she wants as well, because she's also not having fun in this sexless marriage. And it's a nice ending because Hugh gets done over slightly because he wants to get with Mimi, and his fucking wife does. No one saw that coming.
Yeah.
But also I found it slightly hopeful and reassuring, because it's like, well, if they'd just spoken about it and been open and honest and not so fucking British, they might have got what they wanted in the end. And maybe they will. They still can.
It's almost like Mimi and Oscar are kind of like traveling medication for couples, or therapy.
Yeah,
almost.
Exactly.
Like, you can imagine that they just spend their entire lives on cruises, going after random couples that don't look very happy, and then trying to convince them that they should go along this path. And then at the end, they kind of like, it all ends with the same kind of thing, and then they're like, oh, okay, and they have this realization that actually what they have is actually not bad.
That's exactly it, and that's no more so shown than the fact that Oscar's like, right, I'm going to wheel down to her room, make sure she's up so she sees what's going on.
But the weird thing is though, that's exactly what I thought. But then at the end, I don't know if we want to be giving spoilers.
Mate, it's 1992. Go and watch the film if you haven't.
I know,
lazy
but they go.
Sorry. Sorry, we'll edit that out. Sorry, go on.
I mean, the bizarre thing is that that's exactly what I thought we were leading, the messaging. But then they go down into back below deck, and Oscar shoots Mimi, kills her, and then kills himself. And you're like, okay, now I'm just sort of unsure what this was all about, because I thought that maybe the whole story was made up or something, but then clearly it's not made up, because he's got all this trauma and that's why he kills her. I mean, what did you make of the last bit?
I found that that was stupid. So yeah, Nigel, Hugh Grant, goes to try and find, he gets really drunk and then falls asleep, and then goes to try and find his wife, and finds her in bed with Mimi. They're both naked, so you can sort of guess that they've had sex. And then Oscar's there like, oh, mate, I was here for it. It was class, mate. It was class. You missed out on some seriously good stuff right there. And then suddenly his mood switches, and Oscar's like, right, I'm getting my gun out. I'm going to shoot her in the head. I'm going to shoot myself as well. And it's that bizarre thing where you sort of think, well, a lot's happened there, and there hasn't been... Of course, like, he's traumatized, but he was definitely gunning for her to bang someone, whether it was Hugh Grant or Kristen Scott Thomas. And then suddenly he shoots her, which also the effects are dreadful for that.
It's very, very 1990. I mean, the whole film looks very dated,
exactly.
I have to say.
Yeah, it just felt like we've had this before with some of Hugh's films that were based on books. The endings, maybe, I don't know how the book ends, but I feel like the book would probably have a better build-up to an ending, a big bang, flashy ending like a gun, or they probably just added the gun ending to give the film a bit of a like feeling of an ending.
Punch.
Whereas I personally found, if it had ended... My problem is, though, if it had ended on the kiss, you're sort of like, well, what? That leaves a lot of questions in the air. And how would it really how would they have gone back to normality after that? There would have been so many more questions. But that's how I think it should have ended, personally.
I think I would have liked to see it end with Hugh and Kristen Scott Thomas coming. They've got to Istanbul. They walk off the ship holding hands. They share a kiss with an ice cream, and then they're like, that would have been a nice ending.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
So, Diggory, we come to an end of another episode. Bitter Moon is over. Are we taking Hugh for granted?
You know what, man? I'm going to say it's not taking you for granted. I was sufficiently intrigued, and for a 2-hour and 20-minute film from 1992 that's basically a sex fest the whole way through, like a bizarre one, I thought that I might struggle at points, and it might be a bit too weird. But actually, you know what? I found it my attention was always taken with this film. So I'm going to say we're not taking Hugh for granted. This is a decent film. What about yourself?
Again, I'm slightly torn because on the one hand, the film's content from a sort of high level is kind of shit, but it's a long film, 2 hours 20 minutes, but I was never bored throughout the film. I kept, I was really invested in the story. But I also don't think that Hugh's performance is going to go down in the history books of this one. So I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to sit on the fence for once and say that decent film, worth watching if you're a big sort of 1990s Hugh fan. Like definitely worth getting this one on the Blu-ray. But as Hugh's performances go, not his best. That's what I'm going to leave it at.
So then, should we say it's 1-1 though? Should we say I say not taking Hugh for granted, you say is? Because I think that's I think that's a fair reflection on this film.
Yeah, it's probably not one that you're going to come away with being like, this is my favourite film ever. Like, if you go on YouTube, there's a Swedish bloke who reviews this film, and he for some reason loves it. He's like, this is a fantastic film. That was the worst Swedish accent you've ever heard.
But yeah, like you say, shit content, a lot of things that could be wrong with it and are wrong with it. But at the end of the day, I think a 1-1 is a fair reflection. So I think that's it. Another episode in the bag. An absolute pleasure as always. Thank you so much for joining us.
Again, it's been an absolute pleasure. And you know what? We love doing the big films. But as we heard from Mary, our fan from Illinois, USA, in the Q&A episode, it's fantastic to go and look back at some of these old gems that people haven't heard of and shed some light on how magnificent they are as pieces of film history. So yeah, pleasure as always, Diggory, and hope everyone's staying safe out there. Keep isolating, keep doing what you're doing, and stay tuned for some more Hugh.
More Hugh on the way. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. For copyright reasons, the producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. We simply review Mr. Grant's films and hope to shine light upon some of the lesser-known classics from his illustrious career. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.